So getting to seven figures in the SMMA space is not all it's cracked up to be, especially if you do it the wrong way. And that's why I ended up having to do it twice and learning this lesson I'm going to share with you guys today. So for those who don't know who I am, my name is Jimmy. Everyone calls me Uncle Jimmy, and I'm a coach over at Easy Grow, which is Charlie Morgan's course, and I teach service delivery, and I've taught over 500 SMMA owners now how to supercharge their service delivery and keep clients forever. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go and check out my free school group, which is in the description below. But today's video is going to be about the 4 key stages of online business growth. And I'm going to be talking specifically about SMMAs, but this applies to a lot of online businesses out there. So the best place to start, I think, is to explain how I got to 7 figures the first time and why I had to do it again. Let's look at this graph over here, and I want to draw out what the trajectory of my agency, my online guy, looked like the first time around when I got to 7 figures. This is essentially what it looked like here. So if we look at the left-hand side, which is revenue and time, basically my trajectory kind of looked something like this. That's what my trajectory of my agency looked like. Okay, so let me give you some context here. This is $0 and this is 100K per month, okay? So basically I went from 0 to 100K really bloody quickly. This here was basically like strapping a rocket ship to myself because I didn't have to learn the sales side that much. I knew how to sell already before I started my agency, my online guy. I had a background in really high ticket sales, selling agricultural machinery, which are worth about $1 million a piece. So I got really good at selling this, and that side of it was never really an issue for me. I just picked up the sales side and how to sell this once I got the confidence on my ability to be able to do it. And I basically started like everyone else. I got some initial traction, got to 5, 7, 10K a month using just my friends and network and using some strategies I'm going to talk about in future videos. I got to there, and every other agency owner out there, I basically went, okay, my job is now to speed run to 100K a month as quick as possible, because I thought in my head that if I didn't just take on every single client that came across my desk, that this could all be over. Right? And this could all be over quickly. So basically I fired my way through all these key stages, which we're going to talk about in a sec. And after about a solid year and a half, let's say this is 2 years of time, I got to 7 figures. I had my first 100K month, and I thought I was the best dude ever. The problem was, and this is what I want to run through with you guys today, and why it's so important to understand these key stages, is that this was not sustainable long-term. This growth was not sustainable. Basically, what had happened is because I ran up to 100K so quickly, I had no processes and I hadn't taught anyone really anything. So the 100K basically relied on me to show everyone what they needed to do, which is incredibly stressful. It's probably the reason why I have all these freaking gray hairs now that I never had when I started my agency 8 years ago. But in all seriousness, it was just incredibly stressful. And basically what happened here is what we're going to talk about today. So this run up here was just hard work, and it was just a lot of big nights and late nights and no weekends, just keeping the agency, keeping the clients happy, and just like making up for the lack of processes through hard work. And that's what a lot of you guys, the trajectory you're currently on, is where a lot of you guys are heading. And what happened was, I remember very distinctly, at this point right here, I had a phone call from one of my clients who wasn't happy. And this client had been with me for a long time and he wasn't happy. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. I'd been working so freaking hard up until that point, 10, 12, 15-hour days, pretty much every day. And I remember very distinctly, I hung up the phone. I got my wife, who works in the business as well, and said to my wife, I'm done with this. I am shutting the business down, because what's the point in working this hard to say you have a 7-figure agency and only earning like 150K a year? Because that's what happened, right? I sped run up to here, but at this point here, I was only earning 150K per year, right? Which that sounds terrible, and some of you guys are going to laugh at that, but that's the realistic side of it. When you don't have processes or anything in place to support that growth, is that you just don't make very much money. And so I remember saying to my wife, why the hell am I doing this? This doesn't make sense. I could just go and work for someone else running their agency and making the same amount with none of the stress. I'm just going to shut my online guy down. And luckily my wife, who's the absolute rock, we've been together for almost 20 years now, she's my rock. She basically said, Jimmy, just take a week off. Don't worry about the agency. Me and Cam, my ops director, will handle it. Take a week off. So that's exactly what I did. I literally took a week off. I just played my computer, played City Skyland on the computer, and I just sat there and did nothing for a week. And when I got back, my wife and Cam and Pauline obviously had been sitting down behind the scenes and said, okay, we can't just shut this thing down. Why don't we just make the agency smaller? And I'm so glad she did that, because basically what we did from this point is we sat down, came up with a plan of all the things we needed to get in place before we try and grow this thing again. And basically we fired 2/3 of the clients. We got rid of like 12 members of the team, 14 members of the team in a mass redundancy, which I would argue is probably the main reason not to grow the way I did, is because that was one of the worst experiences of my life. You don't know how hard it is to sack several people, and people are crying, people are getting angry. It's just a very bad experience. Also, some of the clients weren't happy, obviously, because we had commitments, but I also explained to them that we're just not going to be able to do it anymore. And basically, we brought our revenue back down to around the 40K mark. So I let go of about $60,000 a month of retainers, and we got back to 40K a month, and we had 6 members of the team. And basically, for 3 months in this period here, we sat down and we just focused on building out our processes. And now I'm happy to say, fast forward a few years later, the agency is now at about $127,000 a month, growing sustainably, and I don't have to be doing 12, 15-hour days. And it was only because of this period here where we were able to consolidate our processes and do it properly and slow down a little bit and make sure things were done properly, so it didn't rely as much on me, that we were able to do that. So what I want to do now is run through how I would have grown sustainably, knowing what I know now and what I went through, so you can avoid that pain that I went through over the last couple of years, getting to the point where I am now, where I've had to grow an agency twice, but now it's grown sustainably and it's actually a fun thing to have, and it's actually making me some decent money. If I was to grow my agency again, it would look something like this. That's how I would grow my agency if I was to do it again. There are 4 key stages that I identified through the process that if I didn't have to do that 3 months and I could have spread it out over time so it wasn't an absolutely brutal thing for me, this is how I would have gone about it. So the first stage I want to show you is stage 1. And stage 1 is super important because it will make or break your trajectory going forward if you don't get stage 1. It's like a rocket in a way. Like if you don't get the rocket off the ground with the first stage, then the second stage, the boosters and everything, can't get it into orbit. So we need to make sure that the first stage, which is arguably the most critical stage of your agency, is done properly. And stage 1, I've called the stasis point. And if you've been in any of my coaching or group coaching calls or anything like that, you would know I talk a lot about this stasis point, because I think it's the point that people miss that is arguably one of the most important points when you're growing an agency. So the stasis point is where your overheads match your revenue. And when I talk about overheads, I am including you paying yourself. So let's say, for instance, your overheads, essentially this number here is the equilibrium point in your life. So not everyone needs $100,000 a month to live. There is a number that you need to survive as a human being and live an average life. For some people, it might be $2,000 a month. For some people, it might be $4,000. For me and my family, it's around $6,000 a month, right? And that pays the bills. That it makes sure that it ensures that our electricity and everything like that is paid for. So let's say, for instance, take me, for instance, right? So $6,000 a month is the money that I need to survive. And then there's an amount that you need to keep the lights on in your agency at this stasis point. So let's say that number is $2,000 a month, right? Take into account your Go High level subscriptions, whatever, maybe a VA as well that's helping you. So that's $8,000 a month, right? That's our stasis point for the agency, right? So that number is critical to know, because this is the number you're going to be aiming for and you're going to work super hard to get to, right? That's when you don't have any clients and you're working towards a number. Don't aim for 10K a month, aim for whatever this number is, this stasis point, right? If it's 8K a month for you, that's awesome. If it's 6K a month for you, that's awesome. Because the reason that number is so important, and generally it's going to be less than 10 grand a month, is because you can basically stay at that number for perpetuity. If you are making enough to pay yourself and keep the lights on in your agency, then hypothetically, you could run that agency forever. Really, when you think about it, at that number. Now, the beauty why that stasis point is so important is because you don't have the pressure on you to keep growing if you choose not to. And I also don't have the downward pressure of too many clients getting upset at me and things like that. My advice is do not leave this point until you stabilize the ship. I see a lot of people who are just trying to speed run to 100K, do what I did, and hopefully they learn from my mistake with this video, but like they try and speed run to 100K when really they should stop at this stasis point, whatever that number is for you, they should stop at and just focus on getting the fundamentals in place and getting the fundamentals right. So this includes some core processes that you need to be able to scale. So these might be processes for onboarding. This might be processes for reporting. You want to get your service delivery down packed and have a working service delivery system that actually works repeatably. You want to focus on your outbound strategies and try and plan out and proselytize what works from an outbound strategy perspective. Because while you're in stage one, like I said, you don't have the pressure of too many clients harassing you, trying to get the most out of you, or your days aren't filled up with client fulfillment. So you actually have time to sit down and do this stuff. Because trust me when I say, the faster you grow, the less time you'll have to get any of this core stuff done. And if you don't have the core processes and the core fulfillment properties in place before you start to scale, then you are just destined to work really hard to fill in the gap. What I've learned over time is that the more processes and procedures you have in place, the less your agency will rely on you as you get bigger, which is really important. Don't be afraid to sit at this number for months and months on end. If I could do it again, I probably would have been at this number for 6 months. There would have been like zero incentive to get any bigger until I got itchy feet and went, yeah, I've got all my processes in place. I've got all my fulfillment in place. I've learned what I wanted to learn. Now let's try and get some more customers and try and get bigger and bigger. So your goal when you're first starting out should be to get to this stasis point and not 10K a month, not 100K a month, because if you just try and get to that arbitrary number without any method or reason, you're going to fail, or you're going to have what happened to me and burn out over time. So aim to stay in the stasis point, and that stasis point is right here. That can be as long as you need it to be to make sure you got your fulfillment in place and you're ready to roll. If you don't have this foundation in place, this first key stage in place, then you're just building shit on top of shit. So the second stage I want to talk about is around the 25K a month mark, right? This is the second key stage of growing an SMMA, or most online businesses, to be fair. This applies to pretty much any online business. My experience is with SMMA, so I'm going to speak to that. So the second stage 2 is what I like to call the inflection point. Every SMMA goes through this inflection point, and it's the sweet spot. And why I call it the sweet spot is because your margins will actually be the best they will ever be at this point, because you are close enough to the ground where you can see the work get done, but you also are efficient enough because you can afford to hire people to help you. But you don't need a management team at this point. You're effectively middle management and upper management, and that allows you to make sure that the processes and everything are followed properly, which will subsequently help keep your margins. And you won't have operational drag, which is a huge issue as you get bigger. So your margins will be the single best at this point. And like I said, this is around the 20 to 25K mark in most SMMAs, and you'll be making 100 to 150 grand a year salary, which is a good amount to make. If I just told you you can make 100 to 150K a year as a salary, and you're going to live a life that's pretty good. You might be doing 5 or 6 hours a day in your agency. You'll be ticking over, but you won't have too many clients where you're going to have to be constantly dealing with clients that are unhappy. That's not a bad place to be. Now, this isn't like the first stage where we're just going to sit in this stage forever. What we're going to do in this stage is we're just going to review our strategies, review our processes to make sure they've survived the gap between 10 and 25K, basically, or like your stasis point and 20 to 25K. So you want to go back and you want to stay in this point and review your processes, make sure they've adapted, because at this point, you'll probably have a small team, maybe 2 or 3 people helping you at this point, and you might have anywhere between sort of 10 to 20 clients, maybe 15 to 20 clients. And you want to make sure your processes have held up during this process, because it's better to identify that now than to get to the next stage we're going to talk about and they haven't held up. So the big reason that this is a key stage is because you really need to decide if you want to do what you're doing long term, right? So At 25K a month, you could basically lower the margins and you could basically have the agency pretty much running itself. You have a small enough client base that you're not going to have problems pop up all the time. You have enough margin to be able to afford to hire people to cover you for most of it. So you might have to do an hour a day, hour or two a day, things like that. But this is where you really need to decide if you want to do this long term, because like I said, this is the sweet spot. This is where your margins are going to be the best. This is where, like, in theory, making the most money. Now, you won't be physically making the most money because when there's a bigger top number, the smaller number that you take home gets bigger. This is the kind of the easy part of running an agency. Once you get to this 20 to 25K a month, it'll feel really good. You'll feel like you're running an agency well. You'll feel like everything's falling into place. And I'm sorry to say, it gets a lot harder before it gets easier once you leave this 25K mark. So you really need to decide if SMMA is for you, or whatever you're doing is for you, because you'll get a good taste for it. You'll know what it's about. And if it really isn't for you, you could probably wind it back slightly or add more people to the team, and you could probably have it running in the background and you could focus on something else, use that cash to grow something else that you want to do. So that's what you're doing in stage 2. You're really just consolidating your processes, making sure they work okay from here to here. And you want to make sure that you get those processes that aren't in place. You want to make sure you punch them out quickly just to get you to the next stage. And then you want to make sure that you really want to do this. And if you really want to do this, you're going to be aiming for stage 3. And stage 3 of running an SMMA or any online business is setting the pins up. I'm using a bowling analogy here. You can't knock over the pins if they're not standing upright. So someone's got to physically go out there, or a machine's got to go out there and set the pins up so you can roll a ball down there and knock them over. Why I say that the stage 2 is the sweet spot and it gets harder before it gets better is because what has worked in the past will pretty much stop working once you get to that 40 grand a month, because pretty much everything that you've had that's worked before from a process perspective will stop working as you scale. And that's what people don't understand. And this is another big pause in time. We need to basically make sure that our processes are rejigged and reworked to evolve where the agency currently is right now, which is around the 40 to 70 grand per month mark. And you'll be making around 200 to 250 per year salary at this point. So your margins are still going to be pretty good at this point, but you are going to start to see operational drag, which is basically where you have management in and the operating of the business starts to eat into the margins and inefficiencies start to eat into the margins. So why your processes will stop working when you go from 25,000 a month to 40 to 70,000 a month is because there'll be a whole bunch of new hires that you've had to hire because you've been scaling up your processes that you currently have. And as you hire more people, those people will probably be less experienced, or there'll be less interaction between you and them because you'll probably have managers at this point helping as well. And so there's going to be gaps in skills that will identify gaps in your processes. So what you need to do is you need to stay at 40 to 70 a month. And you need to stay here until you have scalable processes. So the same thing that got us from 8 to 25K a month, you're going to have to do it again, but just at a bigger scale. Because if you can get all your scalable processes in here, then going from 70 to say 150K a month is just doubling and tripling down on those processes. So if you get a process on how an entry-level person can do, say, media buying or can do reporting for you, and you want to double the amount of clients, when you have processes that are designed for lower, middle, and upper management with layers of management on top of it, then it's just a matter of doubling up. So if you need to get double the amount of clients, you would double up on the amount of people doing reporting, and they can use the same process. So it's really important to sit at stage 3 for as long as that takes. And again, we all get itchy feet. We want to speed run to 100K as quick as possible. And when you're at 70K, it's not that big a jump to 100K. But it's a massive jump in your stress levels if you don't have the processes in place before you do it. And I can speak to experience for this. So I would stop at 40 to 70K a month, and I would make sure that I have my processes in place. I would make sure that the process is scaled, make sure the management's involved, make sure your middle managers and your executives are involved in this process to make sure that when you do continue to scale up past 70K a month, people just know, okay, we need to increase our capacity. Okay, let's hire another pot of people with these processes and these procedures in place and make sure that they just follow the instructions. But again, stage 3 is something that's going to take a long time. I think it's worth reminding everyone that there's no award for getting to 100K as quick as possible. There's some leaderboard that said, I got there in a month. Guys, you have a long life to live. If it takes you 5 years to get to this point, don't be upset. You're earning 200K a year at this point. Don't be upset. You're earning more than 98% of the population. Just sit there, focus on your processes, because trust me when I say, when you get to stage 4, you want to have all these processes in place. And let's talk about stage 4 right now. So stage 4 is the 7-figure club. Welcome to the club. It's a club that a lot of people say they're in, but a lot of the people that are in there aren't in there sustainably. If you follow this process, if you follow these stages to get to this point, you will be in the 7-figure club, and you will be firmly in the 7-figure club, which is where you want to be. But one of the key things you're going to have to do when you hit the 7-figure club and you start scaling past 100K a month is you're going to have to start to implement executive teams within your business with the goal of removing yourself from the day-to-days. I would say at this point in my agency's journey, I'm still doing 3 to 4 hours a day within my agency. I haven't worked out a way to completely remove myself from the process yet. You may have. If you have followed these processes from the start, you may have. But you got to remember, I went up, went down, went back up. So I never really got to sit down and nut this out. But I'm comfortable where I am. I do 3 hours a day. I live a pretty solid life. I'm traveling around Asia with my family. Life's good. But that is because I have an executive team that's built into the agency and that only focuses on that. So I can focus on other opportunities and I can focus on other things. Because ultimately the goal is not to grow the way I grew. You're basically the one and only executive team, and you can't hire anyone else to help because you've got nothing to give them. You go, oh, okay, you're my new executive team, but there's no processes. There's nothing to follow. Everything's stuck in here and people have to extract that information out of me. But you want to make sure that you start thinking about your executive team, implementing it, because you'll have enough revenue to be able to afford an executive team. And this is where you start implementing that if you really do want to scale, or you want to get an exit. This is the other thing, is if you want to get an exit in the future and sell your agency, then you need to have upper management in place so that the person that buys it can just keep business going as usual. I did want to dispel a myth though. Your margins will not be as great due to operational drag as they were when you were generating less revenue. What makes up for it though is the fact that your top line figure is so much bigger. So I would hazard to guess at the moment on a good month, I might make personally around 35,000 a month, maybe 40 on a real good month. Anywhere between 30 and 40,000 a month, I'm taking in owner's distributions from my agency. And that's not like when people think of $100,000 a month agencies, they think, oh, I'm going to get to $100,000 a month and I'm going to keep 90,000 of it. It just doesn't work like that. There's so much operational overheads that are required to keep a 7-figure SMMA going. And you need to take account for that. You need to be realistic. Is anyone complaining about earning that much money? No, but you need to be realistic. That's what you can earn from running an SMMA sustainably and scalably. And I'm sure there's SMMA owners out there that I'm taking more home. I'm just talking about running an agency that really won't give you grief. If you have all this in place, you have a good operational team in place, you won't be getting the random phone calls. You won't wake up one day, your agency won't be on fire. This is how proper business runs. So your margins won't be that good because there'll just be layers of management and there'll be inefficiency due to rework and error. That's effectively why the margins aren't as good, even though you're generating a huge amount of revenue. What your focus should be at this point is continuing to invest in strategies that improve margins. So what I've learned over time now is that improving the margins of your agency, it takes a long time to do. That's why it's a hard, like running an SMMA in the online space is like making money online in hard mode. It's a really good way to make money and you learn a bunch of skills that you can't really learn doing anything else, to be completely fair. But it's a long-term game. You can get to the point where if you're doing 100K a month, where you're taking $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 home a month, but it might take you years and years of improving 1% at a time, improving your margins 1% at a time, improving your efficiency 1% at a time. But that's fine because, like I said, you're going to live a long and fruitful life. What does it matter if you don't make $70,000 a month in the first month you hit 100K a month? That's what time is there for. As you get more experience, as your executive team starts to learn the business better, as your managers get better at what they do, And as your processes get better and more efficient, you will start to increase your margins. And that's when you can start to implement more scaling strategies, or you can start to spin off parts of the team to work on your own projects that may get you the 8 figures and the 9 figures you were expecting from when you started the online space. So guys, that's really it. Those are the 4 key stages of growing an agency. I'm sure there's 5, 6, and 7, and 8. I just haven't hit those yet. I'm being fully transparent. This is where I've gotten to. And if I could do it again, this is exactly how I'd do it. Especially this first stage, guys. Don't sleep on that first stage and this stage. They are critical points in your business. And if you don't do them right, I guarantee you'll do this. It's just inevitable. Hopefully that was helpful. If you like content like this, leave a comment if there's anything specifically you want me to cover off in the future. Also, like I said, make sure to join my school group if you want to learn the nuts and bolts of how to go from here to here or here to here, like in the weeds, service delivery and scaling advice. That's done in my school group. It's completely free, and I hope to see you in there. And guys, I'll catch you in the next video.